Worthless. She was completely worthless. She knew her duty to her husband. It was more than duty. It was her desperate wish. She wanted a child, a son, someone to love and hold, someone to embrace as her own and nurture with unrelenting strength. But she was empty, barren, useless, worthless. Her greatest honor, her deepest wish, all hopeless. And yet, even as she knew her unworthiness, even as she knew they would laugh at her, she traveled to the tabernacle at the appointed day. Through her tears, she cried out to a God that she didn't even know if he cared. She knew the stories of Moses who parted the Red Sea, of the judges who administered the will of God at his command. But she was none of them. She was a simple woman, broken and worthless in the eyes of men. Was it so much of a stretch to believe that God thought so too? Her husband was no help, plying her with double portions to win her smile. "Am I not worth 10 sons?" he would say, condescending kiss ripping open her wounds afresh. Her rivals scorned her openly, even encouraging her children to mock her barrenness. She knew her rival was merely jealous, but sometimes, when she laid awake weeping, she secretly believed that her husband laughed at her behind her back, that God laughed at her as well. 10 times she traveled to the tabernacle, 10 years worthless and mocked. Nothing changed, and yet still she prayed. More often than not, she would be reduced to painful tears because of her rival. Belly twisting into sick knots, she would shrink away, losing herself to the plea of her heart that one day the Lord would listen to her cries. Silent prayers fell from her lips in desperate torrents, her heart wringing itself out in her utter grief. She promised God that if a son was given to her, he would serve the Lord all of his life, and no razor would be used on his head. "How long will you stay drunk, woman?" A harsh voice broke into her thoughts. "Put away your wine." Looking up, she spied the stern face of the high priest Eli. Even he was against her. If the chosen one of God could not even sympathize with her, what chance had she that God would hear, much less respond to her? She haltingly explained herself, telling him how grieved she was. His face softened, surprising kindness revealing itself. "May the Lord grant you what you have asked him for." It was a heartfelt response, and her heart grew glad within her, and so she returned to her home. 3 years later, she gazed down at little Samuel, barely weaned, clinging shyly to her chest. He was her gift, the sign that God had heard her cries. She loved him with an undying passion. He was her miracle, the precious one God gave her. But he was not hers to keep. She looked up at Eli with a smile tinged with sadness. She offered the food that she had presented to him. And then, with joyfully sad heart, she took her precious son Samuel and handed him to the high priest, praising God. She would cherish the time she had spent with her little miracle, but he wasn't hers to keep. He belonged to God, and she would honor the promise she had made. God had remembered her, giving her worth and use. She was valued and important, precious to the God who had made her. He had not forgotten her, and so Hannah, mother of the great prophet Samuel, would not forget him. Ours is not to reason why the Lord gives or takes away. Ours is but to have persistent faith, no matter what comes our way. And though we feel worthless to those upon this ground, the Lord above knows our worth, priceless and renowned.